Welcome to the Two Marketing Moms podcast.
Women with 50 years plus of marketing
Integrity
experience.
and culture are extremely important.
You can still say, I don't know.
Stop multitasking and be present in the
Moms
moment.
have balls, big time.
Welcome to the Two Marketing Moms podcast. We are two women with more than 50 years of marketing and advertising experience between us, and we want to talk about the struggles, the fails, and the wins that we experienced while building our careers, being a boss, juggling work and a home life, and arguably the hardest and yet most fulfilling job, being a mom. This podcast was created for marketing and advertising professionals, especially the up-and-coming marketing stars of the future. We hope these tips, tricks, and advice will help you navigate work and life and get ahead. Today, we are talking about how to be a great account manager, a skill that is necessary for everyone in the marketing and advertising world if you aren't a creative or you aren't a media person. So Kelly and I thought we would start off with what is the definition of account management before we really dive in. And account management is a post-sales role. So after you've won an account that focuses on nurturing client relationships. And account managers have two primary objectives. They retain the client's business and make them happy, and they grow those opportunities within that relationship. And they accomplish these objectives by learning what their clients' goals are and helping their clients achieve them. So I actually think this sets up for a good conversation. I just wanted to bring up, I want to know your thoughts, Kelly, I feel like finding an account manager that has a sales and a customer service point of view on full tilt is very rare to find. I feel
agree.
like most account managers are really, really good at, client relationships. And then there's others that are just really good in sales and, always eager to find that new opportunity. And it's like the unicorn to find both. We're like, they're a superstar.
Well, I like to think of it more as account executives versus project managers, and you see this in the web development world much more. So someone that's a project manager may be more. They might have a PM certification, and their goals is really about making sure that particular project is finished on time and on budget. And it isn't necessarily about growing the relationship with the client, thinking that they're going to come back again, which is the complete difference between project management and account management. Account management is all about building that relationship and the idea of organic growth, and that there's a long-term relationship there, where you hope that's the end goal, that there's going to be a long-term relationship there so that you can not only just retain the business, but, look at other opportunities and, of course, hopefully use that particular client as a referral. So it's a way of thinking, and
Interesting.
You're either trained one way or another. And I've worked with a lot of project managers that are not necessarily trained that way. And I've worked with a lot of agency heads who are in the project manager realm, and they don't really understand the concept of account management. And it was even debated about whether or not that was the right thing to do. And so
I'm sure. I think I told you the story of that. I was working at an agency, and the VP of client services came to me and was like, "Hey, do you have like a manual for account managers that you could, like off the shelf that you could just share with me, because I have to create one." And I was like, no. And that's interesting that you ask, because you obviously don't have one. And obviously if you're getting organized, it is a very useful tool. And I know you have one, Kelly, that is quite impressive.
Well, I created one, and again, I cannot take credit for it. It was as a result of going through Gray Advertising's account management program back in the early 90s, and I've just kept that information and updated it, every couple of years, and then I present it to usually the interns or new people who are account executive to the agency, to really make sure that everyone is in alignment as to what are the roles and responsibilities within an account management department. What are your roles and responsibilities while you're doing billable work, when you don't have billable work? And then of course, what are the tips and tricks? And so we're going to cover some of those things today.
Yeah, we don't want to, this sounds very intimidating. Right? Like if I was a newbie to the marketing and advertising world and I was like, ooh, let's talk about how to be a great account manager. I think maybe the past few minutes might be like, whoa, can I really do this? But I think the answer is yes. I mean, there's so many innate qualities of a good marketer, of a good, advertising pro that just naturally come out in the account management role, I think.
Well, let me ask this question. How did you choose to be an account executive? How did you choose that route instead of account planning or something else?
Well, that's a good question because, that's again where you and I have different experience. So I'm also curious about how you would answer that question yourself. But, I started out in a small agency. So, within accounts, we didn't have those hierarchy of different account roles. We were just all account people, so like as an account, I don't know. I probably I think I started off as an assistant account director, or an AAE, in other agencies. And I did it all, right? Like I did the planning, I did coordination with media and traffic and all of that stuff. So like, I think I was just kind of thrown in, to be honest. I feel like your approach was probably a little more organized.
Well, I would imagine that most people have that similar experience. I wasn't necessarily thrown in because I went through an account management trainee program and they just
so cool.
Don't exist anymore. And so I had the opportunity to try out different roles, but I knew when I joined the account management training program that was what I was going to be ultimately. So I knew, I loved the creative aspect of it, but I knew I could write and I knew I could draw, but I knew I wasn't good enough to actually be the ones to do that, to do the ads. And so I knew going in that account management is what I wanted to do. So I think that made it a lot easier to be able to go through the training and then have from day one, really the training to see, okay, these are the various aspects of the departments. And then we're going to throw you in and you're going to get an account and we're going to train you and teach you how to do it. So it was a much easier thing. I think working in an ad agency that is larger because then you have people above and around you who are, holding your hands. But I think most people probably have your experience where it's kind of sink or swim.
Well, actually, you make me think about it because I did start off as an intern in the agency that I worked for. So like that internship, I got to work with media. I got to work with creative. I was actually like most of my, duties were for new business, which was super cool. Right. And I didn't really do much of that when I started off in the agency world as an account manager. So, maybe interning. There's my answer. Interning was my foray into knowing that I wanted to do account management.
Which is why I think it's so important for us, as leaders to bring interns into the fold. And it's really important for them to have a positive experience and a wide ranging experience so they can say, okay, I like that. I didn't like that. I've experimented with this. And, that's part of our job to help kind of bring up the next generation of advertising professionals and specifically women to bring them into leadership roles. So that's kind of a lot of the theme that we're trying to focus on with this podcast.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you want to
I actually follow some of past interns, a handful of them on Instagram these days. And some of them have come just have the most amazing jobs. And I'm like, wow, they're killing it.
Yeah.
When you're a superstar as an intern, you lay the groundwork for, I think, your career, honestly.
Absolutely.
Okay, so what were you going to say?
I was going to say, do we just want to kind of broadly, even though it's boring, talk about what are the goals of account management?
Yeah, do it.
Okay. So what I tell people is the main goal of account management is to really kind of understand account profitabilities. How does an account make money? And how can you strive to maintain billability for each individual account? a lot of that ways that you can do that is really look for opportunities to improve the creative product for each account and to grow the business organically. Because a client might say, I have XYZ and this is this particular, maybe you're doing 360, but maybe you're not handling social media. Well, that could be a natural opportunity for you to handle as well.
Yep.
And that's what I mean by growing the business organically. And I think a lot of it is really how you approach an account. So it's really focused on taking more of a consultative strategic approach to solving their challenges and making sure that you're kind of always looking ahead for them. What are the trends in the industry? Here's what your competitors are doing. You're constantly offering things to them ahead of when they need them. You're planning for the next year, for 2021 now, and you're seeding those ideas, and you're not standing back and waiting for them to come to you.
Yeah, you know what? It reminds me of a presentation I recently saw your team give where they gave a client, I got a little peek into that, and you gave all these ideas that the client could use that were future oriented, things they weren't doing. And that's such a great example of doing that, of keeping ahead of the trends and making sure, even if the client didn't do one of them, they at least know that you as the agency are thinking of those things.
Absolutely. And it's stuff that we're working on right now for 2021. There's so many new things, media trends that have happened. And we just wrote a blog about it in Capital Communicator, about, people are watching more TV, but that they're really specifically watching OTT. They might be watching radio, but the times that they're watching is different. They're watching more digital radio, listening to more digital radio. They're listening more podcasts. All those sort of things really change how we should be advertising. So it's really important that we, as account executives, are always on top of things. It's funny because my husband's in television and I'm in advertising, and we always feel like we need to be like up to date about what the latest thing is. So whatever the hot new show is on Netflix or Hulu or on TV, we got to see what it is just to make sure that we're aware, so we can make sure that we're in the loop. And, that's kind of,
well, my husband is in UI and UX design. So we kind of do the same thing, but like online.
Yeah. So got to do it somehow. So, I probably, it's kind of boring to talk about all the account management goals listing, but, really.
Well, give me a couple more, because I'm actually curious about this list. So profitability, you said, is number one. I feel like that was absolutely not one of the things that I was on my first priority list to learn when I was an account manager at all.
An assistant account executive or an account coordinator aren't a part of that process, and they don't see that process. And I think they need to be brought in early so they understand, what's happening. There's also a process that you follow in the agency world. What happens? What do you do? What's the first thing you do when you get a new account? What's the first thing that you do?
How do you onboard?
Yeah. How do you get it going? What paperwork do you do? How do you get an estimate signed? How do you make sure there's a job with the accounting department to bill a job? All those things are not very glamorous, but they're important. And it's important to understand those processes. When do you have enough information to write a creative brief? When do you brief the creative? How do you present? All these sort of things that we do as account people are things that you need to learn. And beyond that,
if you don't do that, I think it's important for those things to be really seamless so that the client at the beginning knows that you have everything under control and that, all of those little things are being taken care of, and we're still driving towards that ultimate goal. Because if you have breakdowns in communication, at that point, you are starting off on a rocky road, and it will be hard to recover.
I like to put the timeline in the kickoff meeting, and so they know what to expect.
Yep.
Here's what the creative brief's going to look like. Here's the information that we're going to need from you on that. Here's the production schedule. Here are all the things that we're going to update or develop for you as part of this project. And here's when they're going to be delivered to you. And here's how long it's going to take you to approve them. And here's, et cetera.
Yeah. Setting expectations. And then you got to deliver on those.
So you're baby stepping. You're absolutely baby stepping. So that's important. And then a huge part of being an account executive is realizing that, yes, you may be assigned to one or two accounts, but outside of that, there is dead time, right? There is time that you're available technically, and you're not really supposed to be, surfing the internet. We have plenty of things to give you. I always say to anyone who works with me, I got 25 things for you to do if you're not busy. And I have an entire Slack channel dedicated to random things that I would like to find answers to. So I need a little Siri, advertising Siri in my life to be able to answer those things. But I've got a great bunch of interns that are doing that. But supporting new business efforts is a huge part of what account executives do. And I think also a fun part, and making sure that you're supporting the brand for the company that you're working with, helping with blogging and social media and all that sort of stuff is a big part above and beyond just the regular management of an account. And
that is part of also, as I think we both mentioned in a previous podcast, that that's also like those things, making sure that you utilize your downtime in the right way is a way to help you get ahead, how to hone your skills, how to be better, how to be noticed, and how to move ahead quicker.
Absolutely. And I think it's also important to understand what your boss's goals are too.
Yes.
Because if you can help to support your boss's goals, that's really important. And your boss's goals are usually things like promoting and operating a team philosophy, and having a shared purpose and culture, and making sure that you fit within that culture. That's a big one. Conducting regular department meetings or webinars to share knowledge. Increasing their job is really to make sure that you have the knowledge that you need to do your job. So I'll go through every year and say, okay, what areas you're interested? Do you want to learn Google Analytics? Do you want to learn, do you want a certification for Facebook or HubSpot or, whatever it is? What are the things that you really want to get into this year that will add value to you as an account executive? And let's make sure that those are part of your goals. So increasing internal and external training is a huge part, and making sure that there's budget to be able to do that, so that you're developing a career path for each individual member that's on your team. And if you don't feel like your boss is developing your own career path, that's the time to kind of talk to them and say, hey, where do you see me? I mean, it's hard to say where anyone sees anyone 5 years down the path, but you can at least get some advice. Your boss knows you pretty well, knows where your strengths are, knows what your weaknesses are, and try to figure out a way to not take it so personally if there are negative comments, because that might kind of help redirect you to something else where you may actually be better. And no one really told me that back in the day.
It's the better approach to ask your boss, like, what is the path you see me on? Where do you see me in 6 to 12 months? Versus after a year being like, well, I mean, I've been doing a lot and I deserve a raise.
Yeah.
Which, a lot of small agencies aren't organized enough to really have those little pieces of, their MO, organized. And then people do end up going down that path, spending a whole 6 months or a year and then being like, well, I've accomplished a lot. Like, where's my new title or my whatever it is? When I think the account manager, or at least a new one, if you're new to the industry or if you're just new to an account, aligning with your boss's goals and their goals for you. Such a better way.
Absolutely. And also, if your boss isn't touting your work up the chain, that's a problem. So you need to make sure that you're not just being seen to your boss, but if your boss has a boss or there's multiple bosses, you want to make sure that you're being seen above that. And if they're not saying, hey, look at this great job that XYZ person did on XYZ project, ask, hey, I think this is really good. I think it would be awesome if the CEO saw this. Could I send this to the CEO? Or would you be willing to say this to CEO? Ask.
Yes, I agree. That is like the best point so far, because I think that there are some people that have bosses that take credit for everything that they do, everything that their team does. Right. And, offered up a creative way of getting around that. And making sure that if you do have a boss that isn't going to do that, that then you have to find ways to get that work noticed by other teams, by the CEO, whoever it is. Huge.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I think I've got lots of other management goals. I'll just talk about a couple of them and then we can move into the more fun stuff. I mean, I think we really need to be a sounding board to assist with personal development, which we kind of talked about, and helping people grow their paths. But a big part of what we do as managers or leaders, I mean, you're leading your own agency now. I am not, so I have to report to a CEO, is managing up. But I think managing up is something that everyone has to do, and it's extremely important. So how do you manage up well, and when do you manage up? And you don't want to be the constant one running to your CEO saying, you know, the world's on fire, right? So you got to make sure that you're telling them things that are important that they need to know. So significant developments as they happen. Have any client issues, have they come up? Any budget cuts, new programs, assessment of the client gave you of our agency work. They hated our creative that we just presented. They loved our creative that we just presented. Success stories. You know, what is the atmosphere at the client? You know, is something going on? What's the relationship with the agency? Any potential problems or opportunities that we could have the CEO help to smooth out, which is really what their role is.
Yep.
You know, looking at workload. Oh my gosh, I've got the next 3 months are jammed. I need a freelancer, or this person, I'm going to need a second art director because of XYZ. Can you support that financially? Income forecasts. Number one, that's all any CEO cares about is income forecast. So if that's your job responsibility, then make sure that you get that done. Explain the increases and the decreases. And then, you know, I like to make sure that I'm keeping tabs on each individual employee to whoever I'm reporting to, you know, this person's doing a great job. This person needs some guidance and support in these areas. You know, this person is falling down. Perhaps we need to have a chat with them, that sort of thing. So those are kind of like all of my, you know, management goals, I guess you would say. Anything else for you to add?
No, I think that's good. I think that I had experience, you know, with my mentor bringing me in for those kind of conversations that you just like all of those little things, like the status of the account, basically type meetings. And so I go to observe a lot of those types of meetings. And that was a nice window into, you know, how to manage an account from a higher level. Because I obviously worked my way up from a coordinator, from a entry-level account coordinator type.
We both did.
Yeah.
We both did.
But I did it almost all at one place. So it's hard to evolve sometimes if you don't have new perspectives.
That's true.
Be positive, you know, could be a good thing when you kind of are working in different agencies, and you can fall into new roles maybe a little bit easier than working up.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think all of those are really great. POV for how to be a good account manager, no matter where you are in your career, because it doesn't really change. You just have more and more responsibility. You know, like if you're an account coordinator, you know, then you become an account executive.
Yep.
And you're maybe a little more client facing. And then you could become, I don't know, every agency has a different path, but like, you know, a senior AE, or you could be like what was account supervisor? It's the same thing. You just have different responsibilities and you have different areas of focus.
Yeah. Well, that's a good lead into kind of, what are the account management staff goals? So not really your goals or my goals, but the people underneath you, what are their goals? And number one, it's represent the agency. You are the representative of the agency.
Yep.
You need to know everything about all the various departments, the mediums, the latest trends. You're in charge of all internal and external communications with regards to the client. You are also quality control. When things go out of the agency, you need to make sure that it represents your particular agency well. Is it creative that you're proud of internally?
Yep.
Has been blessed by the creative director? Are there no typos? And does it represent the client's brand? Even more importantly, you need to know the client's brand well enough to say, okay, is this something that the client's going to approve? Is it representative of what they've communicated to me, of what's in the brief, of, things or presentations or meeting notes I've had in the past? Is it a part of their brand standards? All those sort of things. And then the last things in terms of goals would be ensuring, adequate resources in place. We talked about all of that, and we, monitor resource allocation and burn rate. That may not be at everyone's level, and not everyone may actually be monitoring those sort of things, but that's a part of it. And then that leads into how to develop strong relationships with your client.
Oh, I'm ready for this one.
All right, you go first.
Well, my personal take is that developing relationships are the crux of having a profitable account, having a happy team, growing an account, and keeping a client happy for many, many years. And I like to form relationships with my clients that can stand the test of, the things that happen on the daily basis. When a typo does happen, or when a creative concept falls flat, that relationship, they'll always fall back on that relationship. They'll be able to overlook those things as maybe a total failure and see them as just the pathway of doing business together, and that together you'll find a better solution, whatever that is. And obviously, going back to what I said at the beginning, like finding someone who is a self-aware, relationship type of bonder person is the type of person that I gravitate to more, but not everyone is like that in account management. And so there's kind of like, and I've been thinking about this a lot, like what is your work persona, right? Like we do all these like tests, right? Like I'm a INTJ or whatever they are, right? Like,
wait, hold on. You are an INTJ?
Oh no, I don't think I am. I forget what I am.
Okay. I think I am an INTJ, but I skate between I and E. Anyway, go ahead.
I'll have to look it up.
Yeah, I want to see.
But and like I've done all those types of tests, right? Like, there's I can't even remember, but I've done all these like assessments, so that then your team members can kind of figure out like what your strengths are, and especially from a person that's going to hire someone to be on their team, they want to know like what kind of person are you, so that they can support you in the ways that make sense for you and encourage you to develop, right? So like if you aren't a bonder, then it's silly for a boss to expect you to be a bonder, right?
Yeah.
Like you're going to have a different approach. And that's, I don't know, that was a hard concept for me to get as a boss, I think, over time, like picking teammates, even when I wasn't the hiring person, it's hard to pick the right teammate best based on that.
Absolutely.
So I don't know, that kind of opens up a can of worms, right? I don't think we have to really debate it, but I think going back to what I said, like work persona, I think it's really important for each, as you embark upon your career, and even if you're like 20 years in, figuring out what those strengths are and how you're going to use that to accomplish all those goals. So how are you going to, if you aren't a bonder, what other strength do you have that's going to be able to help you maintain and build that relationship with the client. Sometimes a client isn't, or on the opposite way, like I've had clients that aren't bonders. They're just kind of, in my opinion, cold. They don't see themselves as that way. They just form relationships in different ways, and navigating that can be, tough. But if you can figure out, if you can identify those types of traits and qualities, either from an account person perspective or a client perspective, like you'll be a lot more successful. I think it's such an important part of account management.
Well, yeah, and building on that, it's, if you know that that's the type of client you have to figure out, you perhaps don't want an emotional account executive on the
Agreed.
visit.
Yes,
You need to
exactly.
kind of balance off who's going to be able to have the stiff upper lip to be able to deal with someone who's kind of a brick wall sometimes, and
Yep.
that's definitely a challenge. So my list for how to develop strong relationships with clients starts with listening, which I think sometimes we don't all do well. We really need to understand what their problems are. What are their goals? What are they trying to accomplish? What does success look like to them? And, what will if they come back to us later and say, hey, you did a great job, what does that look like for them? And, having constant contact with them in some way, shape, or form. It's really hard to make it all digital these days, especially right now when we're all virtual, but picking up the phone can be extremely important, and you can get a lot more information by picking up the phone or having a face-to-face meeting versus just doing over email or text, because things can get extremely misinterpreted that way.
I feel like a lot of people will say that millennials do not like picking up the phone, right? They tend to like digital communications. And I am, one of the oldest millennials. So I still
can't believe you're a millennial. You're not a millennial. It's not possible.
Well, because my mentor was a phone person. She was taught me that sure, email's great. And, back in the day, like Basecamp is great, but one-on-one communication cannot be replaced by digital. And so I became a huge phone person, like almost to the point where I was like, okay, trying to figure out what ratio, just kind of mentally keeping track every week, like how often I've talked to the client via email, and have I checked in via phone? Have we had any minutes in the week where we've just talked about life and gotten a little bit of non-work in, so that we have a better understanding of who we are, and making sure that I kind of kept track of that quota, so to speak. I mean, it wasn't as rigid as it sounds, but like I just became that type of account person. And honestly, now that I work with people that are true millennials and much younger than me, I do notice this, that they don't like picking up the phone. And I feel like I've been in a lot of meetings over the past couple of weeks where I was, or months, where I've been like, so we're discussing a client problem. Has anyone picked up the phone and talked to the client?
No.
And the answer is no. And I'm like blown away. I'm like, wait, so you actually don't know how the client felt? Did you know that perhaps you misinterpreted an email, or the tone or the emotion in that email? Or maybe you missed the total direction that the client was giving because it was an email reaction to a project or a deliverable. But oh man, yeah, that's like, that would go on a list of my pet peeves, is people that just don't pick up the phone, schedule a 10-minute Zoom, just to check in and get those things that you just don't get via other ways.
You have a visitor behind you. Hello.
The reality of
I know.
Everyone being in the house 24/7.
No worries. I'll keep going
she's just here to pick up her craft.
on staff goals. And then let's move to
Sorry, I went on a tangent, didn't I?
No, it's good. It was really good. Beyond adding strategic value to your client business, establishing credibility is extremely important. And I think that's an obvious one, but making sure that you've got the senior, and even not just the senior, but they want to know that your general account people are credible and they know what they're doing. So you can't always just hire the most junior person to manage the work. They want people who are strong and credible on their team. And these are basic things that not all account people do, but the junior ones should. They, do you know their business? Have you seen their website? Do you understand what they're selling?
Yes.
Do you know their products? Do you know their services? Do you subscribe to their email newsletters? Do you subscribe to Google Alerts? Do you follow them on social media outlets? I mean, those are basics. And if you're not doing that, there's a big problem. And also making sure that you're really are aware as to what their KPIs are, and that you're regularly tracking them and updating them if you have the ability to be able to track them through research and other forms. In terms
that
of
was a great list.
Yeah, I just have
a
couple more on keeping the business, and this is a kind of a fun one about don't just say yes.
Oh yeah,
I
love
need
that one.
On that one. I mean, because
I love that one.
Are you hiring me to execute, or are you hiring me for my professional opinion?
Right. Am I just your doer?
Yeah. And sometimes you get, just do it. And I don't want to hear your opinion. And that is and that's the relationship that you're going to have. But if they really do value your opinion and say, okay, this person does have 30 years experience in the business, maybe I should listen. You have to be very careful there, because sometimes they're just not ready to listen and they don't want to listen. But you also have to give an opportunity to say no when it's appropriate. No, I don't think this is going to work. However, this is the other option that I would select for you, and here's why. So saying yes to everything and immediately can end up being a thing that ends up driving your team a little bit crazy.
Agreed. I was actually writing like my agency culture manifesto recently, and something that's kind of related to that. Like one sentence was, our team is people who aren't afraid to tell a client they don't know.
Yes.
We will find an answer. So like, that's also acceptable too, that you're not just, the yes man, you're not just the doer, and you also aren't the all-knowing either, that it's okay to be the opposite of all those things, because that's what like a real relationship is.
Absolutely.
I think it builds the relationship in a much more strong way for future.
So I think responsibilities are pretty obvious on based on the things that we've talked about. Do we want to move on to general tips?
Yeah.
Okay. So these tips are really kind of targeted more at interns, junior people who've just joined an advertising agency, an account coordinator, assistant account executive, but sometimes account executives need to be reminded as well. And so we each wrote some tips, and some are more obvious than others. So I'll go through a couple, and you go through a couple. One of them we talked about, I think, exclusively on our mistakes podcast, right? Did we do a podcast all about mistakes?
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
Yes. Yeah. So one of
the top 10 mistakes we have made.
Yeah.
How to prevent them.
So within that, my general tips is check and double check. And if you have questions about that, please listen to our other podcasts on mistakes we've made, and please learn from ours before you make the same. Double check every phone number, every URL. It's everything. You name it. Check that. Do you want to give a couple of yours?
So mine is a little more, what's the word? It's not like concrete. It's be an accountable person.
Ooh, an accountable account executive. Yes,
an accountable account executive is someone who takes accountability for their decisions. So if they were the one that let a typo through, they take accountability. Like, it's not the end of the world to own up to it.
Have to,
Because
yes.
eventually whatever you don't own up to is you're going to be found out, you know?
Yeah.
And I do know there are certain personalities out there that don't like to admit weakness, or they get too embarrassed. But in the ad business, you just have to be an accountable person, because mistakes will happen, or decisions will be made that you're going to have to be accountable to, and you're going to have to stand behind. So I don't know. That was not like a concrete example, but that one is like top on my list.
No, that's good. And I'll riff off of that. Be indispensable.
Yes.
People who are indispensable are the last people to get fired, right?
Yep.
Because
Yes.
those are those people that I need to have that person, because that person is the only one that can do X, Y, Z for me. And when you're indispensable, you're going to keep your job. So how can you make your job, do your job so well that you are indispensable? And that's always been my goal. It's always been my goal, and something that I've tried to embed into my teammates.
It's a great one. And something maybe more boring that kind of riffs off that one is that I had on my list is learning protocols and documenting things.
That's on my list to do.
It's another obvious one, right? Like for a good account manager, just knowing what the protocols are. And that goes back to the onboarding that we talked about, like just being really present when those things are happening, so that they just become ingrained. You don't think about them, so you can focus on other things. And then I think pretty sure we talked about this in another podcast too, is just being a good documenter of things. Mm-hmm. Because even if you're, the account coordinator, having the documented, meeting notes, or documented ideas, or learning how to write a great creative brief, all of those documents are, your backup as a good account person when your memory doesn't remember.
Yes. That I put in red, put everything in writing is basically my section on that. And
not everything in email too, right?
Yeah. And I also wrote, be concise. Because you also want to be referred back to the stuff. I keep these emails and I'm always going back. Okay, what were the notes on that? Just to check. In the olden days.
Wait, Kelly, are you a like a note taker on paper, or are you a note taker on computer? Are you an Apple Pen person? I'm curious.
Well, we talked about this because I know you're a hard copy note taker, right?
Yeah, I am.
It depends on where it is. If I'm at a face-to-face meeting, I'll do it on paper. If I'm doing a webinar, I do it on my computer. But I'm constantly taking notes. Like I that's how I get my ideas. So I use on my iPhone the messaging there. I have thousands of ideas in the little, what do you call it?
The Notes app?
The Notes app.
Yeah.
And I have thousands of ideas. Okay, a quote for this, and I'm constantly going back and looking through that. So yes, I write everything down.
Yeah. Yeah, I've started to use Notes more in my iPhone. Mainly when I'm like thinking of something deeply in the shower.
It's hard to do that when you're in the shower to write notes.
I know. I told a client the other day, I was like, honestly, like it seems like some of my best ideas lately are when I'm in the shower, or I'm on a run, or I'm doing something where I absolutely cannot write it down. And so therefore I pull out my phone and write it down.
Yeah. For me, it's always after midnight. I gotta grab my phone and write on it.
I'm not up after midnight, Kelly.
Well, I have a new puppy, so I'm up.
That's right.
All right. A couple more.
To close us out.
Be honest.
Yeah. It goes with accountability.
And I've had a lot of people who haven't been honest, and mistakes that we've made. I'll give you another example. Way back in the day when mobile apps were just starting, we hired a mobile app vendor that we had vetted, or we thought we had vetted, who turned out to not be above board. And we paid a certain amount of money to them, and they didn't deliver. And the client wanted the app done by a certain time. So I scheduled a meeting with the client and went to them and I said, the vendor's clearly not going to finish this project. And so it's our fault. We made a mistake. We chose the wrong render. We're going to make it right. We're not going to deliver it when you needed it, but we're going to deliver it in the next month, and it's going to be on our dime, and admitted it. And while they were upset, the biggest reaction was, wow, thank you for being honest.
Yeah, huge.
So being honest is important. Let the creatives sell the creative. That's one we've talked about in the past, right?
Yeah.
And then another one that I always had as a young account executive, someone said it at Gray Advertising, was the hot potato rule.
Ooh.
And the hot potato rule is when you get a new project or new instructions from the client, you got to act like it's a hot potato. You don't hold on to it. You don't like wait a day to say, oh, this client asked me to do X, Y, Z. You got to make sure that you package that hot potato, put some tin foil around it so it's not so hot.
I love it. I've never heard of that. I love that.
And figure out what needs to be done and pass that hot potato to the person who's going to execute it. Is it creative?
Yes.
Get the hot potato off your lap onto someone else's lap. Otherwise, it remains a hot potato and you can't work with a hot potato. I think I've taken the analogy way too far, but
no, it's so true though. So
just
true.
Move it. So that's another one of my big ones. And then at larger agencies, one of the biggest challenges that I've seen is there tends to be silos. There are silos between the creative, between the media, between the production, between the account management, and they don't always work well together. And so this idea, which I hate calling it this, but everyone calls it building bridges. We're going to build some bridges. You've heard this expression, right? Are you building bridges with your team?
I mean, honestly, that's not one that I use. I have a whole list of things that I overuse. That is not one of them, but maybe I should start using it.
It's big on the corporate side too. It's build bridges between your departments, between your divisions.
How about this one? Alignment.
Oh yes. Wow.
Alignment could be the same thing.
And raising up the flagpole. A couple of final tips for me. Think of your boss as your second client.
Ooh,
obvious one. My pet peeve: never be late to a client meeting. Always be 5 minutes early. Always.
Ooh, and I will piggyback on that one. Is always confirm.
Oh, okay, that's good.
Right? Like, just confirm the meeting. Have someone on the team.
Will be there on the way.
Especially if you're an account coordinator, an AE. If you're bringing the whole team and your boss, confirm the meeting is happening.
That's good. That's good. I hadn't thought of that one for this.
Yeah,
so that's good. Never lose patience with the client in front of them.
Ooh.
Take a deep breath. Vent later. You don't want to get into a verbal disagreement. It doesn't do anybody good.
Yep. Agreed.
Give more than is expected, even if it's not in your contract. There's a lot of ways to give. It doesn't mean necessarily deliverables, but ideas, thoughts.
Agreed.
That sort of thing.
Agreed. That's a good one.
Deliver early.
Ooh.
What do you think about that?
That's a great goal, Kelly. Do you do that? Because I don't.
I do on new business. My RFPs are always delivered at least a day early. And I do that strategically. Now, someone might be able to catch me on this. There may have been one or two that I slipped. I never miss a deadline ever, but I try to deliver early. And there's a strategic reason for that.
I like it.
So that's one.
I do not practice that, Kelly. You have one-upped me there for sure. I'm going to remember that one.
I know.
I like it though. I like it.
All right. You can aspire if it works for you.
I will aspire to that. Totally.
Treat everyone at the client with respect and interest, no matter if they're the person answering the front door or the account coordinator or just answering the phone. That's extremely important. Be organized. I think that's, here's the last one that I have. Help educate your client, but don't do it in a demeaning way. And I think I may have made that mistake in the past.
I have definitely made that mistake.
And well, let's talk about that for a second, because it's hard,
Real
because
icky and uncomfortable.
we're excited to, like, pass on our knowledge,
I
but you
know.
don't want to act like you're a know-it-all. And it's hard not to skate that line. It's
I
hard to
know.
skate that line. So that's something that I'm still struggling with, and need to make sure that because some clients may not want to be educated, or
Agreed.
may not want to be educated by you.
Yeah, I have a client that does come to me and ask me for advice about things in business and how to deal with certain situations. And I always, try to listen a lot in those situations and give little tidbits from my experience, but definitely I tread lightly because I don't want to be a know-it-all. And I think I definitely, let's see, in my mid-20s for sure, had some bad situations where I was coming off as a know-it-all, and it was the client smacked me back for it.
I agree, and I think
I
that's
learned
the
the hard
problem.
way.
I think that's the problem with type A women like us.
Yeah, it's
we
so
we
hard.
knew where we were going to be, but we weren't there yet.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Ooh, that
It
one's
is
a
what
good
it is.
one, Kelly.
And then let's bring this down to our target audience, which is women. And,
Yeah.
a lot of our tips here are, very general, but in terms of tips specifically for women, I think the biggest challenge as an account person is knowing when and how to speak up, especially when you're in a room full of men. Or if you don't agree with the man that is speaking, how do you politely disagree, but still share your voice, especially when, that man may be in a quote mansplaining mode. That's a big challenge, but women have to learn how to speak up, especially if you have an important point to make. And
how to be intentional about how emotional you get when you are bringing up those points, right? I am dramatic. I have a tendency to come across as dramatic. That's not necessarily my intention behind my communications, but I have been told that I come across as dramatic. And so there are times where I have to be intentionally, or I have to intentionally dial back on that when I am delivering, an opinion that's different or something like that. It's a great point, especially for women.
yeah, and it's a challenge, and I'm in the same position I think you are in terms of having to moderate myself.
Yeah.
It's not about moderating. You need to be able to give your point of view in a way that's not threatening, because that's what we're used to doing it as women, right?
Yeah, it's just understanding your audience, right? I mean, it's everything that we do in marketing. But we just take it to a personal communication point of view.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's so many books. We feel like this would be the perfect podcast to talk about, like books that we've read. No, that like specifically talk about this topic, like how to be a woman in the workplace and how to, come off strong and confident and not a bleep.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. And one of we'll try to roll this out with one final thought is,
yes.
In certain situations in the past, even in the present, I will sit purposely at the head of the table.
Ooh, that's a good one.
And that drives some men nuts.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure.
But I had earned my place at the
Agreed.
head of the table. So don't be afraid to take your place at the head of the table if you had earned it. if you're running the meeting, if you're running the show.
Yeah. Such a good one, Kelly.
Don't just automatically sit on those side tables around the table.
Yeah.
This is beyond lean in. This is, that's
here. One of the books I was thinking about.
I'm running the show.
That's a good one. I had never really, that really gets down into the psychology of men and women, doesn't it?
Sit at the head of the table when you've earned it. It's a power position. It's there for a reason. Don't be afraid it. Now, if you're an account coordinator, maybe you don't sit at the head of the table. Yeah. You have to have earned the place to be able to
unless your boss has asked you to lead a meeting. And
yes.
then it might be appropriate.
Yes. Yeah. Anyway, we can end with that one.
Yeah, these were, you really outdid the tips on this one, Kelly. I'm taking away some of these. I'm going to implement them myself.
You had some good ones as well.
All right. Well, thanks everybody, and check us out on another podcast.
Talk to you next week.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you liked what you heard, please leave us a podcast review or send us a message at twomarketingmoms.com and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time.